External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar has said the ruling dispensation of Bangladesh is expected to ensure the safety of minorities. Speaking during the question hour in Lok Sabha amid reports of attacks on Hindus in the neighbouring country on Friday, Jaishankar said the treatment of minorities in Bangladesh is a matter of concern. The 17-year-old Hindu girl from Bangladesh has run through the night and crossed over to the Indian side, where she was detained by border security officials and handed over to the West Bengal police. The teenager girl was an ISKCON devotee. Her family, a minority community, has been facing threats for the past several weeks. The situation got out of hand when fundamentalists in Bangladesh reportedly threatened to kidnap her and kill her and the rest of her family as well. This is when she resorted to crossing over into the Indian territory. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi have been indicted in a new corruption case. The third graft reference against Imran Khan reportedly revolves around the purchase of an expensive Bulgari jewellery set at a throwaway price. Now, this development comes just a week after the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf founder and other party leaders were charged in connection with the attack on army headquarters in Rawalpindi during last year's protests. Although Khan was granted bail in the case by the Islamabad High Court last month, he remains in prison due to multiple other charges. South Korean opposition leader Lee Jae-myung has said that the best way to restore order in the country is to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. In his recent speech, Yoon vowed to fight to the end, blaming the opposition party for paralyzing the government. While the opposition, the Democratic Party, has called Yoon's remarks a declaration of war against the people of South Korea. Yoon survived the first attempt to impeach him last Saturday when most of his ruling People's Party boycotted the vote. Since then, at least 7 PPP members have publicly supported a vote to impeach him. Opposition parties have introduced another impeachment bill and plan to hold a vote at 8 a.m. GMT on Saturday. They need at least 8 PPP members to pass the bill, with 2/3 majority required. According to reports, China's President Xi Jinping will not be attending the United States President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. Earlier this week, Trump had reportedly invited Xi to attend his inauguration ceremony on the 20th of January. This despite his history of hawk rhetoric and tariff threats. According to reports, instead of Xi Jinping, Chinese ambassador to the US and his spouse are expected to attend the inaugural event. No additional officials from Beijing will be traveling to Washington, D.C. for Trump's swearing-in ceremony. On the other hand, Trump's advisors have said they are considering inviting other world leaders to the inauguration. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara. America's top diplomat Blinken, who was a little more than 1 month to leave office, stressed the importance of keeping up the fight against the Islamic State. He also visited Jordan and Turkey to discuss peaceful transition of power in Syria following the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. While White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan visited Israel in a bid to wrap up a ceasefire deal. The United Nations chief has denounced the extensive violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity as Israel continues to push into Syrian territory beyond the occupied Golan Heights. A spokesperson for Syria's new government has said that a judicial and a human rights committee will be established to examine the constitution and then introduce amendments. With both the constitution and government suspended for 3 months, humanitarian groups warn of the dire situation in the country. They say it is not ready to support hundreds of thousands of returning refugees. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the positions of the soldiers from the 27th Rocket Artillery Brigade in Zaporizhzhia. He marked the Ukrainian Ground Forces Day by presenting soldiers with awards and thanking them for their service to the country. According to Zelensky's presidential office, the 27th Brigade was the first in Ukraine to receive the High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, or the US-made HIMARS systems, and now provides artillery support for the defense of Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. The White House has announced what it called the first ever national strategy to counter Islamophobia. The strategy entails 100 steps federal officials are taking to curb hate, violence and bias towards Muslims and Arab Americans. The proposal follows a similar national plan to battle anti-Semitism that President Joe Biden unveiled in May last year, as fears about increasing hatred and discrimination were rising among US Jews. Officials worked on the anti-Islamophobia plan for months, and its release comes 5 weeks before Biden leaves office. Britain's economy has shrunk by 0.1% in October, underlining the scale of Labour's challenge to get the economy growing. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show that the unexpected fall in GDP was driven by declines in construction and production, while the dominant services sector stagnated. Economists polled by Reuters had expected the economy to grow by 0.1% instead. It follows the decline of 0.1% in September and sluggish growth of 0.1% again in the third quarter of the year. This, according to figures last month. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's change in immigration policy has reportedly hit the country's higher education sector. The once thriving industry is reeling from job losses, program suspensions and possible closures, especially at smaller institutions. The Trudeau government capped foreign students' permits earlier this year, a population key to sustaining Canadian universities. Trudeau's government continues to crack down on foreign students, temporary workers and even permanent residents. This to relieve its strained housing, the job market and public services. A memorial service is being held at the Memorial Hall of the victims in the Nanjiang massacre to remember those killed by Japanese aggressors during World War II. China's national flag was flown at half-mast in front of the crowd. December 13 is the National Memorial Day and the anniversary of the Nanjiang massacre, which took place in 1937. During the 6-week massacre, Japanese invaders brutally killed about 300,000 Chinese civilians and unarmed soldiers. Same-sex marriage supporters are protesting in Japan's Fukuoka city after the Japanese High Court ruled that the country's civil codes barring same-sex marriage violate the constitution. Now, the supporters stood with an LGBTQ+ flag and banners reading, "Marriage equality now. Love is love and love for all," outside the High Court. The ruling said banning same-sex marriage is shutting out same-sex couples' fundamental rights to seek happiness. It's the latest victory for the country's LGBTQ+ community that adds pressure on the reluctant Japanese government. A small plane crashed onto a New York highway in Westchester County on Thursday night. Authorities have confirmed one of the 2 people on board have died and the other one has been injured. The crash shut down traffic on Interstate 684 in Harrison. It's about 25 miles northeast of Manhattan. Harrison is also near the New York-Connecticut state border. Video from the scene shows the damaged white plane against a guardrail in the center median, with emergency vehicles blocking all lanes of traffic. Department of Environmental Conservation was on the scene to clean up spilled aviation fuel.